I sold the beach house my grandfather left me after my aunts and uncles tried to force me to let them use it for free year-round. They're now calling me a heartless traitor to the family legacy. I, 34F, never expected to be in this position, and the guilt and family drama have been eating at me for months. My grandfather passed away last year at 89, and to everyone's surprise, except maybe mine, he left his prized beach house solely to me in his will. It's a beautiful 3-story Victorian home on the California coast that's been in our family for 40 years. He bought it back in the 80s when coastal property was still somewhat affordable, and it's where we spent countless summer vacations growing up. The house itself is a masterpiece: 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a wraparound porch with views of the Pacific that take your breath away, and my grandmother's meticulously maintained rose garden that I've been caring for since she passed. Some background: I was very close to my grandfather. After my parents died in a car accident when I was 12, he and my grandmother practically raised me. While my aunts and uncles offered to take me in, mostly out of obligation, I later learned, my grandparents were the ones who stepped up. They had recently retired and said they had plenty of love and time to dedicate to a grieving child. I spent every summer with them at the beach house while my aunts and uncles would come and go with their families for a week or 2 at a time. My grandparents were always generous about letting family use the house, but they had strict rules about scheduling and maintaining the property. Everyone had to book their time in advance, clean thoroughly before leaving, and contribute to a maintenance fund for any damages or wear and tear. This system worked well until my grandmother passed 5 years ago. After her death, my grandfather continued living there year-round, though the house felt emptier without her. I visited him at least twice a month, helping him with maintenance, keeping him company, and preserving my grandmother's garden. We'd spend hours on the porch, drinking coffee and talking about everything from his time in the Navy to his hopes for my future. None of my aunts or uncles visited nearly as often, though they still expected their annual summer vacation slots. They actually complained when Grandpa asked them to give him more notice before visiting, saying they shouldn't need permission to visit their own father. I should mention that I'm the only one in the family who didn't move up in life the way my aunts and uncles did. They're all successful professionals: 2 lawyers, a surgeon, a real estate developer, and a tech executive. I'm a high school art teacher who married a firefighter. We're comfortable but not wealthy. My aunts and uncles always had a slightly condescending attitude about this, making comments about how we could do better if we just applied ourselves. My grandfather, however, always said he was proud that we chose careers helping others. The trouble started immediately after the will reading. My grandfather left the house to me, along with a letter explaining that he knew I would preserve the property and respect his wishes. He also left substantial money to my aunts and uncles, $200,000 each, but they were furious about the house. The letter, which I later shared with everyone, probably a mistake, specifically stated, "Sarah, I'm leaving the beach house to you because you're the only one who truly loves it for what it is, not what it's worth. You've shown me that you'll preserve your grandmother's roses, maintain the old woodwork, and keep the spirit of our family home alive. The others see it as a vacation spot or an investment, but you see it as we always did, a place where love and memories grow." My Aunt Linda actually laughed when this was read aloud, saying, "Dad must have been losing it at the end. Why would he leave his most valuable asset to the one person who can't afford to maintain it?" This hurt, but it was just the beginning. At first, they tried to contest the will, claiming I had manipulated my grandfather in his final years. They pointed to all the time I spent with him as evidence of my undue influence. My Uncle Pete, one of the lawyers, led this charge, bringing up every time I had helped Grandpa with his finances or driven him to medical appointments as proof that I had somehow coerced him. This was completely false. He was sharp as a tack until the end and had updated his will with his lawyer 2 years before his death, even having a geriatric psychiatrist certify his competency. The challenge failed spectacularly, with the judge specifically noting the clear pattern of my grandfather's thinking and the detailed explanatory letter he'd left. But that was just the beginning of what would become a year-long nightmare. My 3 aunts and 2 uncles formed a united front, insisting that since this was a family house, they should all have equal access to it year-round. They drafted up a schedule dividing the entire year between their families, leaving me with just 3 weeks in August, the time I usually spent there with my grandparents growing up. They presented this to me at a family dinner, not as a request but as a fait accompli, with Uncle Mike saying, "This is the only fair way to do it." The schedule they created was ridiculous. They had divided all major holidays between themselves, assigned each family their month for summer vacation, and even included a clause that they could swap times without consulting the owner, me. They also insisted that no maintenance or changes could be made to the property without unanimous family consent, effectively giving them veto power over everything while contributing nothing to the costs. I refused. I explained that while I was happy to arrange reasonable vacation time for everyone, I planned to live in the house part-time and possibly retire there eventually. I also pointed out that the property taxes alone were over $30,000 a year, not to mention insurance, maintenance, and utilities. It wasn't fair to expect unlimited free access while I bore all the costs. I proposed that if they wanted regular access, we could set up a system where they contributed to the expenses. This suggestion was met with outrage. My Aunt Sarah, who had always been the family mediator, said I was being selfish and greedy. She brought up how their children, my cousins, had grown up spending summers at the beach house too, and how I was stealing their inheritance. I reminded her that I had practically lived there while she and her kids came for 2 weeks each July, but this only made her angrier. Then came the harassment. They would show up unannounced with their families, claiming they had always used the house this way. They hadn't. Once, I arrived to find my Uncle Pete's entire family already installed in the house. They had used the hidden spare key, which I didn't even know about, to get in. When I objected, he said, "Dad would have wanted us to use it like we always did." They left the place a mess, with wet towels on the antique furniture and scratches on the hardwood floors that cost hundreds to repair. They started telling all our extended family that I was hoarding our grandfather's legacy. Cousins I had been close to stopped speaking to me. At family functions, I would overhear comments about how some people just can't handle inheritance responsibly and how teachers probably shouldn't be managing valuable property. My Uncle Mike's actions were particularly egregious. Not only did he make copies of the old house key, but he actually tried to install his own security system when I was away, claiming it was for the family's protection. I only found out because a neighbor called to ask why there were workmen drilling holes in the facade. I had to rush over and stop them mid-installation. The holes they left required extensive repairs to prevent water damage. The final straw came during Thanksgiving. I had invited everyone for a family dinner, hoping to work things out. I spent days preparing the house, cooking traditional family recipes, and even set up a presentation about different ways we could fairly share the property. Instead, they ambushed me with a family intervention. They had drafted a legal document that would put the house in a family trust, with equal ownership divided between all of us. The document, which I later showed to my lawyer, would have effectively stripped me of any real control while making me responsible for all the costs. When I refused to sign, my Aunt Sarah started crying about how I was destroying the family, while Uncle Pete threatened to sue me again, this time for breach of fiduciary duty to the family heritage. The most painful part was watching my cousin's kids, who I adore, being used as emotional leverage. Aunt Linda had actually coached her 8-year-old daughter to ask me, "Why don't you want us to have a beach house anymore, Auntie Sarah?" It was manipulative and cruel, and it was the moment I realized the situation was never going to improve. I left that dinner and called a real estate agent the next day. The house sold for $3.2 million in less than a month. Coastal property values have skyrocketed since my grandfather bought it for $185,000 in 1983. I didn't tell any of my aunts or uncles until after the sale was complete, though I did ensure all their personal items were safely packed and stored. The fallout has been nuclear. My phone is flooded with voicemails calling me every name in the book. My Uncle Pete is threatening to sue me for destruction of family property. My cousins, who I was once close to, won't speak to me. My Aunt Linda wrote a long Facebook post about how I sold out our family's heritage for blood money and how my grandfather would be turning in his grave. The post got hundreds of sympathetic comments from extended family and family friends, most of whom don't know the whole story. What they don't know is that I took half of the proceeds and set up an education trust fund for all my cousins' kids, 12 in total. Each child has $125,000 earmarked for their college education, managed by a professional trustee to ensure the money is used as intended. I haven't told anyone about this yet because I want it to be a surprise when the kids reach college age, and frankly, I'm worried my aunts and uncles would find a way to interfere if they knew. The rest I'm using to buy a smaller beach house in Oregon, where my husband and I plan to start our own family traditions, drama-free. We found a lovely property that reminds me of my grandparents' house in its early days, before it became a source of family strife. It even has a garden where I've transplanted some of my grandmother's roses. My husband says I did the right thing, that my aunts and uncles were trying to bully me out of my inheritance. My best friend says they left me no choice. But some family friends have suggested I should have tried harder to preserve the family legacy. My grandfather's old neighbor, who knew him for 30 years, told me that while she understands why I sold, she feels sad seeing strangers in the house where she watched our family grow up. Here's why I might be the this house was the center of our family's memories for 40 years. My grandfather probably hoped it would stay in the family forever. By selling it, I've permanently altered our family's dynamics and traditions. Some of my cousins' kids will never get to experience the summer vacations that meant so much to us growing up. Here's why I think I'm not. The house was legally mine, and my relatives' behavior made it impossible to maintain any kind of fair or peaceful arrangement. Their sense of entitlement and attempts to bully me out of my inheritance left me with no good options for keeping the house while maintaining my sanity. I've tried to preserve the legacy in my own way through the education fund and the new house. Edit 1. Thank you for all the responses. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, I have documentation of all their harassment, including texts, emails, and security camera footage of the unauthorized entry attempts. My lawyer has copies of everything. 2. My grandfather's letter specifically mentioned that he had considered a family trust but decided against it because he had seen how such arrangements had caused problems in other families. He specifically cited his sister's family fighting over their parents' lake house until they were forced to sell it. 3. The college fund is in an irrevocable trust managed by a professional trustee. My aunts and uncles can't touch it or prevent their kids from accessing it for education. I made sure of this. 4. Several people asked about taxes. Yes, I consulted with tax professionals and structured everything properly. The education trust is set up to minimize tax implications for the kids. Edit 2. Several people have asked about my grandparents' reasoning. My grandfather explained in his letter that he chose me because I was the only one who showed genuine interest in preserving the house itself, not just using it for vacations. Over the years, I helped him replace the roof, update the plumbing, and maintain the garden my grandmother loved. I knew every quirk of the old house, which windows stuck in humid weather, how to coax the vintage boiler through cold snaps, where the best spots were to watch whales migrate. My aunts and uncles treated it like a free hotel and often left it in poor condition after their stays. Edit 3. Wow, this blew up. I can't respond to everyone, but I appreciate all the support. To clarify one more thing, I did try to propose several compromise solutions before selling, including a formal scheduling system with everyone paying a share of maintenance costs, renting it out part of the year to cover expenses, buying out their desired time shares at a reasonable rate, setting up a proper management company to handle bookings and maintenance. They rejected all of these options, insisting on full, free access or nothing. Edit 4. Someone asked about my parents. Yes, this house is also where I feel closest to them. My mom and dad got engaged on that beach, and some of my clearest memories of them are from our family vacations there. That's part of why my grandparents had me spend so much time there after they died. The new owners did allow me to take a few meaningful items, the porch swing where dad used to read to me, and a piece of the kitchen wall where mom had marked all our heights growing up. They're being incorporated into the new house. Final update, my cousin's wife, Uncle Mike's daughter-in-law, reached out privately to tell me that she overheard my Aunt Sarah and Uncle Mike planning to force a sale and split the money once they got control of the house through their trust scheme. They were already talking to developers about potential values. So much for preserving the family legacy. She apologized for not telling me sooner and admitted that the family's treatment of me has been horrible. I feel even more confident in my decision now, though still sad about how everything turned out. Final update, a few of my cousins have started reaching out after seeing this post. Yes, they found it. We're having some good conversations about everything that happened. 2 of them actually apologized and said they understand my position better now. Maybe there's hope for some relationships to be salvaged after all. I appreciate everyone's support and advice. It helps to know I'm not crazy for feeling like I made the right choice, even though it was a painful one. Final update, 6 months later. I wasn't planning to update again, but so much has happened that I wanted to share. Turns out sometimes burning bridges lights the way forward. First, the college fund surprise came out sooner than planned. My cousin Amy's daughter got accepted early to Stanford, and they were struggling with the financial aid forms. When the trustee contacted them about the education trust, Amy broke down crying and called me. She hadn't spoken to me since the sale, but we talked for hours. She admitted she had always understood why I sold the house but had felt pressured by her parents to take their side. This sparked a chain reaction in the family. As news of the education trust spread, several of my cousins broke ranks with their parents. They saw that while their parents had been screaming about family legacy, I had actually been working to secure their children's futures. Uncle Pete tried to challenge the trust, claiming it was set up with stolen family money. The judge literally laughed him out of court. His wife finally had enough and told him he could either drop it or pay for marriage counseling. They're in counseling now. The new beach house in Oregon is fantastic. Smaller, but it has the same soul as the old place. I used some of the original house's fixtures in the renovation, so it feels like a piece of my grandparents is still with us. The rose garden is thriving. Turns out Oregon's climate is perfect for them. Best of all? 3 of my cousins and their families visited for Thanksgiving. No drama, no entitlement, just gratitude and healing. Their kids played on the beach while we swapped old stories and made new memories. My grandmother's pumpkin pie recipe still works just as well in Oregon as it did in California. My aunts and uncles still aren't speaking to me, and that's okay. Sometimes the family you choose is better than the family you're born with. The kids have a college fund, we have a new beach house full of love instead of resentment, and I finally feel at peace with my decision. Oh, and remember my grandfather's letter? Found another one hidden in his old desk that I moved to the new house. Written just a month before he died. Sarah, if they're making you miserable about the house, sell it. Your grandmother and I bought it to bring joy to our family, not pain. The memories live in your heart, not in the walls. Grandpa knew. He always did.